Have you ever stopped to think about this weird pattern? Like, throughout history, every time there's a really big breakthrough, could be a tool, a machine, a whole new way to communicate, the world doesn't just, cheer. Often, it actually panics.
It's a really fascinating pattern, isn't it? And it's not really because people are being irrational. Not exactly. When you dig into it, new technology, well, it fundamentally messes with what we know, how we do things, how we work, even how we see ourselves. It disrupts all these habits, these structures we rely on. So our mission in this deep dive is basically to unpack that, this recurring theme. We'll look at how people have consistently reacted to big innovations with this mix of, well, awe and sometimes outright alarm, using some really specific examples from history.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go back first. Think about the 1830s. Photography first appears. Seems so normal to us now, obviously. But can you imagine the first reactions? Some people genuinely believe that getting your picture taken could literally steal your soul.
Right. That's the one everyone remembers. But the anxiety, it actually went quite a bit deeper than that. Think about painters back then.
Yeah.
There was this very real worry, this fear that photography would just make them obsolete, which, that's a massive disruption to art, to a whole profession.
Yeah, their livelihood.
Exactly. And people even worried it could spread illness somehow, some weird photographic process nobody understood. This is the very first time people could, freeze a moment in time. That whole idea was so new, so powerful. It's kind of understandable that the public was just bewildered. What did this mean for reality itself?
Okay, so photography messed with our idea of reality. What about something that changed how we worked, how we live day to day? Let's jump forward a bit to the 1840s. Elias Howe invents the sewing machine. And there are protests against the sewing machine. That seems intense. What was so threatening about that?
Well, that's a great question because, it reveals different layers of anxiety. The most obvious one, the surface fear, was definitely about jobs. Tailors were worried, and understandably so, an economic threat.
Makes sense.
But here's the really surprising part, the bit we often forget. There was this major societal concern that it would make women, quote, too independent. And, believe it or not, morally corrupt.
Morally corrupt because of a sewing machine.
Okay, because they'd have too much free time. Seriously. It wasn't just about leisure time itself. It really struck at the heart of, 19th century ideas about the home, about a woman's role, about patriarchal control. A woman's time, her value, was often tied up in these laborious tasks like sewing everything by hand.
Right, endless mending and making clothes.
Exactly. So this machine threatened to free up huge chunks of that time, and that challenged traditional gender roles, what society expected a woman's day and her life to look like. It hinted at maybe a shift in economic dynamics within the home, too. So you get this backlash linking newfound free time to, well, a moral decay.
Wow. Okay, so from work and morals, let's go. Up.
Literally.
The elevator. Late 19th century, these things start showing up, and apparently people were just absolutely terrified to ride in them, which is, again, hard for us to imagine now.
It really is a stark contrast, isn't it? The anxieties were super specific, too. People worried about suffocating in the little box, or the cable snapping, that was a big one, plummeting to your death.
Okay, the cable snapping fear feels somewhat rational, maybe, for the time.
Maybe a bit more, yeah. But then there was also this bizarre belief that just traveling vertically up and down fast might somehow damage the human body, like it would jar your insides or something. And this fear, it was so strong that architects, when they were designing these new tall buildings, they often still put in huge, grand staircases right next to the elevators. Buildings were sometimes designed to avoid elevators unless you absolutely had to use one. Just trusting a machine to pull you up against gravity, that was deeply unsettling for a lot of people.
Okay, so we've got fear of heights, fear of machines. Now, what about fear of something invisible? Electricity. When electric lighting started coming into homes, say in the 1870s, that must have felt like magic. But it also came with some pretty strange warnings, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's fascinating how a new invisible force can tack into all sorts of existing cultural anxieties. The warnings were, well, all over the place. Fears that the light bulbs, this bright, unnatural light, could literally blind you.
Blind you.
Yeah, or that the electrical outlets might just spontaneously explode. Or even, and this connects back to the sewing machine fear almost, that these invisible currents flowing through your walls could somehow warp your morals.
Warp your morals. Electricity.
It sounds wild, but it shows how new, poorly understood tech often becomes a scapegoat, right? For broader fears about society changing, maybe decay. Think about it, this hidden energy coming right into your private home, changing the natural rhythm of day and night. For some families, that was just too much. They outright refused to get electricity installed. They stuck with gaslight, with candles, the familiar.
From invisible currents to disembodied voices. Let's talk about the telephone. Picture it. It's 1876. You pick up the thing for the first time and you hear a voice. Someone talking, but they're not there. How did people even process that? What were the reactions?
It was completely revolutionary, obviously, but also deeply unsettling for many. The reactions were pretty extreme. Some people just flat out called it unnatural, like it was an affront to real human connection.
You can almost see that, actually.
Right. Others genuinely feared it was like an invitation for evil spirits to come into your house through the wire, or even that it could cause mental illness. The idea being that hearing voices when no one's there might literally break your sanity.
Wow. Evil spirits and insanity.
It raises that question, doesn't it? What happens to our sense of reality, our connection, when talking is suddenly mediated by this piece of technology? It challenged the very idea of what it meant to be present with someone.
Okay, jumping ahead again. The 1920s. Radio arrives. And live musicians, they really pushed back hard on this one, didn't they?
Yeah.
Claiming it would totally kill the music industry.
They did. And, they weren't entirely wrong in the sense that it did severely disrupt the industry they knew. Live performance changed. Absolutely. But the counter-narrative is just as important, maybe more so. Radio didn't kill music. It transformed it completely. Yeah. It created entirely new ways to perform music, to share it, to listen to it. It basically kicked off the whole era of popular mass media music. Its reach grew exponentially. It created tons of new jobs, artists, producers, broadcasters. So yeah, it was a painful shift for some, definitely. But ultimately, it led to a massive expansion of music's reach and the industry itself.
Right. Okay. Fast forward quite a bit now. The 1990s. The internet starts bubbling up. And some of those predictions, they feel eerily familiar today.
Oh, they really do. It's striking, actually. The arguments back then mirror so many conversations we're having right now. You had some people saying, oh, it's just a fad, it'll pass.
Read that one before.
Exactly. And then others warning, very seriously, that it would completely ruin reading habits, that it would collapse our attention spans, that it would destroy real human connection, leaving us all isolated behind screens. Does any of that sound familiar to you?
Sounds extremely familiar. And sticking with the 90s for a second, email. When email started becoming widespread in offices, that caused its own specific kind of panic, right? That's an anxiety I think many of us can still feel today.
It absolutely did. Yeah, that one hit close to home for knowledge workers. The specific panic was all about email overload, mental fatigue, the death of focused work.
Yep, still dealing with that one.
Right. This idea that we'd just be constantly interrupted, unable to concentrate on deep, meaningful tasks, that was a huge worry. And look, to be fair, that particular anxiety, it still haunts us. We're still grappling with it, which maybe highlights that sometimes the fears aren't totally baseless, but the initial scale of the panic often blows the eventual reality out of proportion.
So, okay, we've walked through quite a history here. Photography, sewing machines, elevators, electricity, telephones, radio, the internet, email. The pattern seems incredibly clear, doesn't it? Every single time a really profound innovation shows up and it's met with anxiety, often intense anxiety. And it's not really because the tech itself is evil or even necessarily bad in the long run. It's because fundamental change is just uncomfortable for us. It challenges our habits, it shakes up power structures, it can even mess with our sense of who we are.
Exactly, that's the core of it. But what this whole journey through history also shows really clearly is that despite all those initial fears, humanity adapts. We always do. What looks like a terrifying threat at first often morphs into an incredibly powerful tool. A tool for creativity, for productivity, for connection. It opens up possibilities we couldn't even conceive of when we were busy being scared of it.
Which brings us right back to now, to our moment. It's 2025. And we are seeing this exact same fear aimed squarely at AI, aren't we? It's the same headlines, the same predictions about jobs disappearing, the same worries about society breaking down, the same kind of, this is going to ruin everything energy. It's almost predictable.
It really is. And that brings us to, I think, the most important takeaway for you, the listener, to consider. History strongly suggests that what matters most isn't the technology itself. It wasn't the camera or the sewing machine or the internet, and it likely won't be AI either. What matters is how we choose to use it, how we adapt to it, how we integrate it into our lives and our society. That distinction between the tool and our choices about it, maybe that's the crucial thing to reflect on as we navigate what's next. What do you think that means for our future?